Now, what we actually use in the real world these days is called the summary prospectus. Now, when you sell a mutual fund, it's a continuous primary offering. So when you sell a mutual fund, you've got to give the client a prospectus. Now, there's actually three types of prospectuses. You have the full or statutory prospectus. Now, the full or statutory prospectus is the full thick thing. Now, back in the day when we had paper prospectuses, it was a big old thick thing, about 100, 150 pages. It was pretty thick, right? And it had basically all the details of what the person was investing in. Now, that has to be delivered at or before solicitation. At or before solicitation. What does that mean? That means if you meet with a client on your first appointment and you bring up the name of a specific mutual fund, you have solicited it because you brought it up. You are now going to have to give them a prospectus. So there's a difference between, I have mutual funds that have done 10% averaged over the last 20 years, and I have XYZ mutual fund that has averaged 10% over the last 20 years. Now I've got to give them the prospectus for XYZ mutual fund. Capiche?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Not at the time that you close the sale, at the time you solicit the sale. Because once again, it all has to do with transparency, right? If you're getting the client to consider buying something, you got to give them the information to make that decision. Now, what we actually use in the real world these days is called the summary prospectus. Now, a summary prospectus is 15, 20, maybe 25 pages, obviously much thinner, and it's just the key, most important thing. Now, here's the thing is that the client must have the option of getting the full or statutory prospectus, which is generally going to be a hot link in the statutory prospectus, in the summary prospectus. And the way we do it now, I mean, back in the day, what I used to do is they would all be paper, right? You know, back in the 1990s, back in the early 2000s. So I'd be walking in, because I never sell just one mutual fund. I'd sell like a portfolio, which might have, 4 or 5 mutual funds in. And so I've got 4 or 5 of these things that are all 100 pages. I'm going to, boom, set it on the kitchen table, and then start explaining to the client how simple mutual funds are. And they're looking at this pile of paper going, yeah, that looks simple, right? But now we have the electronic delivery of the summary prospectus. And so that's essentially what you're going to do. Now, in addition to the prospectus, there's this thing called an SAI, a Statement of Additional Information. Now, this one is big. This could be 400 or 500 pages, and it's every little detail about all the financials of the company. Now, this is, once again, has to be available upon request. Nobody's ever requested it, and the almost 30 years I've been in the business now, nobody's ever requested an SAI. But we used to keep one around the office in case, God forbid, somebody asked for one, right? And all it was is just this huge paperweight. It was just this huge thing, right? I mean, it's like a phone book, right? And anyway, the idea, there we go. The idea is that if somebody really wants the detailed information, it's the equivalent of, well, you did I think you said you did some options trading, right? It's the equivalent of, for stock traders, the 10K and the 10Q. So that's basically what that is for the mutual fund. Okay? All right. Cool. Now, we also have what's called an omitting prospectus. Now, an omitting prospectus is very simply the sales flyer. And so on this fund fact sheet, let me blow this up here. All right. On this fund fact sheet, you have all sorts of information, including the returns with and without the full sales charge, right? And this kind of illustrates the difference, because you see over here on the left, these are expense ratios. For the Class A shares, the expense ratio is, 80 basis points, right? The Class C shares is almost double, 155 basis points. It's almost double, right? And so that's like, it's pay a sales charge up front, maximum sales load is 5.5%, or pay twice as much on your ongoing expense ratio. And so what happens is then eventually even with the sales charge, the Class A shares in the long run will do better because of the lower cost over time. So for a short-term investor, C shares are fine. But if anybody's going to have their money in there for any period of time, then you got to have it in A shares. And it's explain to them how it's in their advantage. So it's a trade-off, right? They're going to pay a sales charge up front, but it's going to save money in the long run. It's pay me now, pay me later, right? But it's going to show here a graph of the performance, the top holdings. It's going to show the alpha and beta. It's going to show the diversification, where all the things are invested. So it's a good reference for the clients, but this is what they mean by the omitting prospectus. It's the sales literature. And it says that it must be accompanied by a prospectus because the omitting prospectus, that sales flyer, we call it the fund fact sheet, it's fund F-U-N-D, not fund F-U-N. It's fund F-U-N-D, fund fact sheet. So, but
it is fun.
It is definitely fun. Yes, it's loads of fun, especially if they say yes and invest a lot of money. So, back in the day when we had paper, I would take the fact sheet, I would throw it in with the prospectus, and that's what I would hand the client. And then I would have another copy in my presentation binder. Now, obviously, today, I'm emailing all that stuff, but nonetheless, it's got all the details for them, and that's what they mean by that.